Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Hockey Journey Podcast, episode number 63, the John Vanbiesbrouck Hockey Journey, presented to you by onlinehockeytraining.com. I'm your host, Coach Lance Pitlick. If you're new here, please make sure you subscribe so you won't miss out on any future episodes. Before we strap on the pads, make some saves, and begin this conversation, if you want to learn more about me, my hockey experiences, what I know, and most importantly, how I've been helping hockey players get really good with a stick and puck, just head on over to onlinehockeytraining.com and gain instant access to my 10-part video series where I'll show you everything. Consider it my gift to you. Lastly, if you live in Minnesota or are visiting the state of hockey sometime soon and you want to schedule an in-person off-ice stick skills lesson, I'd love to have the opportunity to show you my little world. Go to sweethockeycoach.com, that's sweethockeycoach.com, and watch the video on the homepage for instructions. Thanks, and I look forward to working with you sometime soon. My next guest, John Vanbiesbrouck, was pretty good at the goaltending craft. This Detroit native took a different hockey path, deciding to swim against the current, foregoing the traditional college route, and goes up to Canada to play Major Junior. In 1981, he was drafted in the 4th round, 72nd overall to the New York Rangers, where he played the majority of his career. He also spent time playing for New Jersey, Philadelphia, the New York Islanders, and down in Florida, where he backstopped the Panthers to the Stanley Cup Finals. He's won the Vezina Trophy, was an NHL All-Star several times, holds a number of goaltending records, played in 882 NHL games, was inducted into the USA Hockey Hall of Fame, and is currently the Assistant Executive Director of Hockey Operations for USA Hockey. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming John Vanbiesbrouck to the show. Beezer, welcome to the Hockey Journey Podcast.
It's my pleasure, Lance. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Well, you were obviously someone that I saw play and had a few times to play against you in the NHL, but it was funny how my kids, they're playing hockey, kind of connected us, where we actually had some in-person conversations and chats on the phone. So I'm looking forward to having a little further in-depth conversation. Before we get going here, I start with everyone that's played or a guest on here. And before we get to what you're doing in the hockey community today, let's take a moment and look in the rearview mirror. I would like to go back and just kind of hear about your upbringing. Where'd you grow up? What was your childhood like? Your parents, siblings, friends, your introduction to hockey and other sports? Basically just tell us in a nutshell what it was like growing up John Vanbiesbrouck.
Yeah, appreciate you asking. And it's many moons ago, as I'm 59 now. So some of the things are getting more difficult to remember, but it was a good upbringing in Detroit, Michigan. So we lived on the east side. So it was a blue-collar neighborhood, I would call it, growing up. A lot of cops, firemen living on the street. And, you grow up in a place that you don't really know, what is Detroit and how all that is. But our family was, we had 3 boys. I was the youngest child of 3 of the boys, and had 2 parents who immigrated from the old country, as it was once known. My mother from Italy, my father from Belgium. My dad came through with his family, immigrated through Canada, and then over to Detroit, was a bricklayer and built homes, so on the construction side. And then my mom came over with 2 of her brothers, and then they met at a wedding of a neighbor or something like that. I don't know all the details, but I do know they became my parents. So But we, the language that we spoke in our family was primarily English. But my mom, to try to capture in a moment, learned how to speak through watching reruns of I Love Lucy. So
no way.
It was
really?
Oh yeah, she learned just by the experience that she was having, because she worked 3 jobs at one time, and my dad was, like I said, a bricklayer out. So they made the best they could for us, but one would ask, how could you possibly start with the sport of hockey in that kind of environment? When people come from the old country, they like soccer, and my dad was a soccer player, and he had some skill and talent. He played for a young national team or two, and then played locally in a semi-pro league in Detroit. But I never really saw that, but it outlines the love for sports. And then, I think at that time, back in the late 50s, early 60s, people fell in love with the Detroit Red Wings. If you were a Detroit fan, there was a pretty famous player that played there known as Gordie Howe. And
yeah, I heard of him.
Yeah, I think that the world has heard of Gordie, Mr. Hockey, and he ignited a whole generation of players underneath him, along with the other great players he played with, Ted Lindsay, to name a couple. But
yeah.
So the way that I started is I was following my brothers, really. My oldest brother, Frank, was a goalie, and he fell in love with the position, thumbing through the pages of Sports Illustrated and seeing cool goalie masks and wanting to be that guy. So I wanted to be like my older brother and play goal. And there's so much that I really love to be able to tell stories about, but I really don't know other than just to say that. I just wanted to follow my brother's footsteps. And anybody who's had a family and raised kids can really resonate with the hockey family becoming the hockey family. You're at the rink all the time. I mean, I remember standing on the edge of the glass, or at that time, the fence, and watching my brothers play and, hearing the sounds and all the rest of the stuff. Because hockey was, growing in the country, but it was one played primarily outdoor. It wasn't played in a real place that was of comfort, I'd call it,
Yeah.
So I started to skate down the street at a friend's house that his dad was a police officer, and they had 5 boys, and he built the rink for them in the backyard. So that whole scene that hopefully resonates with you and the listeners of outdoor playing backyard hockey.
Oh yeah.
That is the core pillar of how hockey grew in the United States. It wasn't in the great rec halls of how communities were built on. It was made in people's backyards and on ponds and different places where you could just play a game of pickup with people you don't even know. But that's kind of where I learned how to skate and play and developed a love for the game. And, I like everybody else, you just wanted to handle the puck and have some fun playing and play with other players. And, you develop some abilities. I didn't know what I was developing, but the position of goalie just kind of came to me. Other sports, I played baseball. I was a catcher and shortstop and wanted to be in on all the plays. I guess I had some skill and some talent because I was given some opportunities growing up to play on some better teams, I guess. I didn't even know. But, so from that, I mean, I my parents, I depended on them. And I don't say that and take that term lightly of dependent, or put it in a context of, anything that they were pressing me to do. They wanted us to play hockey, and they were sold out and drove across the town, so we could play in different places. Detroit's known as a competitive town. And I think today is probably known as a competitive center. probably more than a developmental center for hockey and growing up in the state. But, with all that, it was just my parents' commitment, I guess, is what I'm boiling down to. I mean, they were committed to putting us in cars and driving us around town. So we were very fortunate to have parents that would want to do that. And with that, it gave me an opportunity to play on some travel teams. And boy, did we travel. I think trying to relate it to today's travel is you really can't do it because highways were just being built, and to try to get to the other side of town took a long time. So I just
you're only like 4 years old, 4 or 5 years older to me, and it just sounds like it's a different world at that time. They didn't have the roads, the highways like you're saying. Before you get to specifically your youth hockey, I wanted to hear the difference, because here in Minnesota, we're different than most of the country. We have community-based hockey where you just play during the winter for wherever you live, that community, and then that was it. Now, in the spring, then you'll put these all-star teams together playing AAA. So was that the same thing, or was it association-based hockey?
Yeah, we had association-based hockey. I think that I'd like to know, and I still don't know, where each state kind of changes in their civic kind of mindedness. I totally respect Minnesota, and I love the civic-minded playing in your community. But it just didn't seem there were enough players and outdoor rinks available that you could go and do that. I mean, we quickly moved to indoor rec centers, and that's kind of what I know. But we did have it. It wasn't one of those things that I think that whoever was the leaders at the time had this, brainstorming idea, and let's put people in cars and make them travel across, town to go play other people. I think that everybody today would prefer to have the Minnesota civic mindedness. It's just our state wasn't civic minded enough, and what came the state's way, I believe, built basketball courts and baseball fields, and not really any outdoor hockey centers. Or in that way, the privatization of it, I think, came in a lot quicker. That's my take on it. I could be wrong, but I think it just became the privatization where then you hand it over to the private sector rather than having, I would say, just genuine volunteers, do it. I think that's where the big switch came. And then, and not to laud or take away from either piece, it's just, when you build a rink, if the Civic Center built rinks and we were dependent on the Civic, we would only have like 5 or 6 rinks in the whole town. So the private sector started to see there was a profit center there, and I think we were the first state, maybe the second, to have a twin rink and then multiple rinks. But not to say that that's a badge of honor or anything. It's just it shows the private sector trying to grow, and I think that's the big takeaway that I have today is that it just moved into the more competitive really quickly because of it. I don't think it's right or wrong. I just think that's the way it happened. And, if I could move the deck chairs around the boat, I'd probably put it back into a more civic-minded approach. But, from here from Michigan to Massachusetts to LA now, and across the state, I don't see a lot of civic-mindedness like I see in Minnesota, which is a great thing. So that's my tip of my cap to Minnesota, to maintain that direction and to say, keep on keeping on. And the fact that, some things you just don't need to change. Like with all the change that the world's asking for, why change that? Like that doesn't need to be fixed. But I would, sorry to interrupt. The last comment I'd make on that is just I met a bunch of people along the way from the other side of town that I learned a lot from, though, too. So I was grateful for that.
Yeah. So when are you talking about when the private sector saw that there was an opportunity? Is that when the CompuWares, Little Caesars, and it came into play?
Yeah, I would see the difference there is they didn't own rinks at the time. They began with, well, I would say the dedication to an organization first, because the organizations that were civic minded didn't want to grow into these travel programs. They didn't see the benefit of putting, why would we as a civic arena not have just people coming to our arena? Why would we want to put them in uniforms and send them out and go to other arenas? So I think that's how Little Caesars and CompuWare came in, is, and they had others before them, that owners of other industries that wanted a sponsor. And there's been a lot of sponsors throughout the year. The ones that have stayed the test of time have been Little Caesars and CompuWare. And they're probably the most noted ones in our state, because they have had owners that have gone on to own NHL teams. So, you become pretty famous pretty quick when you go and do that. But the dedication to youth hockey, has remained over the 30 to 40 years that I'm talking about. So there is a lot of dedication there, but there is a lot of difference too. So the privatization on the rink part, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it other than to say somebody saw a business venture there, and rinks started to pop up all over the place based on a privatization that you could then lure the civic people in, but it was a flip-flop. The public-private partnership was based on the private owning the building, not the public. And then you would bring in the public sector to play there. So that's kind of a flip-flop of what happens in Minnesota, where you have the public sector owning and having the private sector rent. So just a little difference there.
Yeah. Well, I didn't expect to have that little transition, but that was awesome. Good information. So let's get back to your playing career. You're the youngest of three, and any youngest in the family, I know that they're scrappy and they're competitive. So at what age did you kind of decide that I want to see how far I can take this hockey thing?
Yeah, so it's a good segue into a shout out for Little Caesars, who I played for, back and forth. I didn't make every team that I tried out for, but I did play inside Little Caesars for a long period of time, from, my 10, 11, or even 9 years old, 9, 10, 11, up until I was 14. Then I got cut from a team and had to find another place to play. But I regrouped and got back on at that time, when I was 16, I played for Little Caesars. It was known as, Major Midget at the time. And, we went and played in tournaments across, into Canada. And we were a tournament-based team. Even though we won the state tournament, our coaching and saw us being benefited by traveling a lot into Canada. And that's why a lot of the Detroiters go to the major junior route, because we got exposed at that time to Canada. And a funny story is that when I was playing Major Midget, we went to the Hall Quebec tournament, and people were talking about the OHL draft at the time. I wanted to go to college and play at Michigan, but my jersey was left behind, and I wore this jersey for a player called Mike Affolter, wore his jersey and had a real good tournament. And I come to find out that Toronto Marlies in the 4th round selected Mike Affolter, thinking it was me. And then the general manager of the Sioux Greyhounds, Sam McMaster, who's had quite a career in pro hockey, came to me at the time and said, were you the guy that played in Hull, Quebec? And I said, yes. And, I got an invitation to go up to the Sioux to try out. And, I beat out all the guys. They had 4 draft picks, and I didn't know any of this at the time. I just went in as this naive kid and thought I'd be cut in a couple days. I was wearing my brother's pads and skates and didn't have a lot of stuff. But I thought I'd give it a shot. I rode the bus all the way up there. And at that time, it was like a 8-hour journey. You stopped in every town. By the time I got there, I just, I was kind of defeated and said, this isn't probably going to work out. But as soon as I took the ice, I got, as you said, when you're the youngest, you're usually a little scrappy, and my competitive instincts came out, and I ended up making the team as a walk-on. And, from there, it was a shocker, not only to me, to my family, but, now I was living in Canada playing major junior hockey against my own wishes. Like, I wanted to go to school. But at that time, as a younger guy, you had to wait for a scholarship. So I just was impatient, I think, and just jumped on the opportunity. And then, that year I won 40 games and had a real good year. Not bad. And had a real good year and got drafted by the Rangers in the 4th round. And ironically, in that year, and this is a quick part of the story, there was a pretty good coach in New York at the time named Herb Brooks. I was drafted in 1981 and went to my first training camp. And Herb didn't shake my hand. He just put his finger into my belly and thought I was this fat little goalie from Detroit.
I can just see him doing that.
So could all of Minnesota. And so I walked up. I got called up that year because John Davidson, who's now the president of the Columbus Blue Jackets, got injured. And so did Steve Baker, I want to say, who was out of Massachusetts. And so I got this call as a call up, and I thought, oh, wow, I'm going to go to Madison Square Garden. So I carried my stuff, looked for my transaction in the transaction section just to make sure that it was true. But
you're playing for the Greyhounds at the time?
Yeah. And as an 18-year-old, I was called up to New York. And,
holy cow.
Yeah, so I not only ended up staying for 2 days, I ended up staying for 2 months. And
wow.
Played my first game against the Colorado Rockies, who are now a baseball team. So, it was we won the game 2-1, and I played well. And to this day, Nick Fatiu, who's long known for his fisticuffs, lost his man, and the player came in. His name was Paul Gagne, and scored for Colorado. And Nick Fatiu to this day, keeps coming up to me and saying, I had my man. And I keep saying, Nicky, it's 40 years ago, let it go. It's but that was my pathway up. I mean, I know it's a short story, but it's one, packed with, if you listen closely, it's packed with, opportunity, jumping on the opportunity. There was no direct path of, hey, you're going to be at this place at this time. It was all just made up of opportunity. And then, I went back to junior hockey and then I was, my first official pro year, I was sent down to the Tulsa team. We were the Tulsa Oilers, which was New York's farm club. And, we ended up winning the championship. I won the award for best minor league hockey player. And next year I made the big club. So, that's 83, 84 in those years and played in the world championships. And, so had some real good opportunities inside our countries, with USA Hockey, with playing on the international stage, played twice in the World Juniors, and always loved playing for my country.
20 years of it, man. Crazy. So, you just kind of, pass by really quick on it. But I'd like you to talk, if you would, just on a couple of the experiences that one you've already mentioned, and that was that your first full year with Tulsa when you guys won the championship, and then your run with the Florida Panthers. Were there similarities in both teams? I mean, were you guys lights out like right at the start, or did it just kind of compound over the course of the season, where by the end you were clicking on all cylinders and you knew that something special was going on?
Yeah. I bypassed a lot, but I would say this about Tulsa is, so this is 83, 84. So there's also in the background something going on called the Olympics. And at that time, you had to be an amateur in order to play in the Olympics. And if people recall, our team, our Olympic team was made up of college players and traveled for that year. You gave up a year of college in order to play for the national team. And, they would go around and play, and they had an organized circuit, and then they would go in the Olympics. So when I got called up when I was 18 years old, I nullified all those chances. So I didn't really want to do that, but I didn't have a choice, I mean, they asked me to sign, and there wasn't even really any time or anything to consider. I was giving up my right to play on the Olympic team. And at that time, the coach was Lou Vero, and Lou, kept on calling me, and I wondered, why was he calling? Like, there's nothing I can do here. I have to sign the contract. So, as a naive player, I mean, I just got sent down, and, we're going to play against the national team along the line in the minors, because that's who they played against. And we ended up beating them in Tulsa, one during our schedule, because everybody in the minors played against the national team. And, we beat them 2-1. I think they outshot us like 42-20. And I was the player of the game, and losing the handshake line. And he's like, "You're wasting a great opportunity, Johnny. You're wasting it." And I'm like, "Lou, there's nothing I can do." He goes, "Well, you just beat the best team, 2-1. You deserve to be here." And I'm like, "Well, go talk to somebody about it, because there's nothing I can do about it." And I say that because our team in Tulsa was made up of really good NHL minor league players in today's day would have all been playing in the show, because at that time there was a 21-team league. So players like George McPhee, who was out of Bowling Green, who's now the president of the Vegas Golden Knights, would tell you, I mean, we were a really good team, and he was on it. And, we had some guys that played on the 80 Olympic team. Robbie McClanahan, was one of them. We had, guys that were great European players. Mikko Lainen was another guy, and some veteran guys, and toughness. And I can go through the list of guys, but we were a good team. And the following year, I think, 6 of those guys, 7 of the guys that played on that team made the big club. But we won a championship made up of, veteran players and guys that stuck together, because that year in Tulsa, we folded and then had to base ourselves out of Colorado and had to stay in hotels and just play every game on the road. So the similarities to winning the Cup in 1996 would be the fact that you learn how to, together with veteran players on an expansion team, you learn how to come together and deal with the adversity and the obstacles of being a pro hockey player. And Lance, yourself, and others that may be listening to this podcast can tell people that it's not glitter and glamour. It's the obstacles, it's the adversity, It's the stuff you have to deal with that you have to, adapt to in order to make yourself successful. Nobody's going to make it successful for you. And I think those things were some of the greatest things that I've learned in life, how to adapt with adversity, how not to quit and get frustrated and just cash it in, saying, that it shouldn't happen this way and saying, why me? I never had a why me moment, other than, a couple games that I got shelled, you'd say, why me? But other than that, you're just waiting for that next obstacle every day and you want to engage in it, whatever it is. That's pro hockey, is the next opportunity to turn things around.
Absolutely. Well said, because that's it in a nutshell. And I've done a lot of content consumption on just that, listen to leadership and habits. And to a person, their greatest achievements came after going through an enormous amount of some type of adversity. A quick word from our sponsor, Sniper's Edge Hockey.
Sniper's Edge Hockey is your one-stop shop for your at-home hockey training needs on and off the ice. Find the perfect start to your at-home training area with slick tiles, synthetic ice, or a rink liner. Or upgrade your home setup with one of our top quality training tools to help you work on soft hands, all of your dekes and dangles, perfect your one-timer, and improve the power and accuracy of your shot. Find it all online and in stock for immediate shipping at snipersedgehockey.com.
So I want to, 20 years, John, I didn't play that long. If I had another 18 years, I might have been close to you. But, there were some tough years. There were some dark years that I had to go through. Is there anyone that kind of stuck out for you that was extremely difficult, but somehow you pulled through? And how did you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that it's years, because how years go. I mean, even when you're playing for a team that doesn't have a great record, you have to find a way not to be embarrassed, or that's what pros do. I mean, they have a championship way about them to get up the next day and really compete hard, because that it could possibly turn around. Because it's never as bad as it seems, and it's never as good as it seems. But you do want to recognize, like how did the Islanders win that many Stanley Cups in a row? And how did the Oilers do it? They just didn't do it with Wayne Gretzky. And they just didn't do it with Mike Bossy. I mean, there was so you're learning all these principles as you go along. And for me, to answer the question accurately, it was, my biggest challenge always came to, who was going to play the next game. And there was a player that came along in New York, and his name was Mike Richter. And Mike was probably the first guy that really challenged me for my spot. And ultimately he won the spot, and it wasn't because his numbers were better or any analytic, because, I don't want to sound prideful, but I had some good numbers at the time. But the bigger factor was a young guy who was really good, and that he was really good. And you also know that at some point the team would have to make a decision. But, we played a solid 3 years together. I learned more about competing in those years and it wasn't that it was just the threat. It was more, how can I be better the next day? And I think that pushed me, and I'm very thankful for Mike Richter. I'm very thankful because I think it added on to my career. You keep saying 20 years. I probably would have played 10, but then you start looking at how you can compete every day, and you don't really say, well, I'm going to play 20 years. And, all these things. You just want to be good the next day. And you want to be better. You want to earn the right to play. I mean, I looked around the league, and Grant Fuhr was playing 70 games, and Patrick Waugh and all these guys. And even if they played bad, they would be in there the next night. I mean, I couldn't play bad and be in there the next night. So that was, I think, one of my strengths was, just the mentality of how to get prepared. I taught myself how to get prepared. I wasn't a big guy. I taught myself a regimen and usually using different techniques in order to be prepared. And, I just wanted to survive every shift of every game. Goaltending position, you can't take any shifts off. And I mean, if you do, it's very noticeable. So, and then just the team aspect of it, early on in my career, I was called a very selfish player by another teammate. And it was the year that I won the Vezina Trophy, and I didn't want to be a selfish guy. And, and then I was handed the award by Eddie Jockman, at the NHL Awards. And Eddie was one of my heroes, and he became a goaltending coach in New York. And I just remember going back to that player after, and he said, I saw your interview, and you thanked all the players, and I never thought you would ever do that. And I just thought for a moment, is that the guy that I am? Is that the way? Is that my reputation? Yeah. I didn't want to have that reputation, even though people make reputations for you. And, in life, you go through and realize, boy, no matter what you do or what you say, people are still going to think of you the way they think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Hockey is just such a game of moment to moment. And, for some reason, I've always connected with goaltenders when I was playing with them. And, they're considered oddballs, and you got labeled, and I'm sure that wasn't the only label that you wore during your career. But I just think that goalies found out how to prepare way sooner than anyone else, even to this day. So you touched on that you learned how to prepare for games. And you got a lot of young listeners. I'm sure that would apply to anyone preparing for anything that means something to them. What are a few of the techniques and strategies that you would implement prior to game to get ready?
Well, that's a great question, and that's a whole seminar, really. But I would say that the first caution that I would throw cautions out there first and ask the question, is it a preparation or is it a superstition? Because they're closely related, and I would really caution against superstition. If you didn't do something that way, you weren't going to have success. Or if you did it that way and you went out and played poorly, you would have to find the next superstition. That's one caution that I would say, be careful of, like taping your stick one way and setting it on the rack. And, it's very, very, I see guys can't leave the ice for games and all these superstitions. Now, is that a way of preparation? I would say not. I'd say when I see a guy visualizing when he's out on the boards, the old Ryan Miller, when he was visualizing a game, that's not a superstition. That's a preparation. And to be distinct in that, you really get to know yourself by how you prepare. Now, I would say that I started with stretches. Now, it wasn't meditation, but I would stretch in a certain way that it convinced my body that I was prepared. So there's a certain set of approaches that you can do that you convince your body that you're prepared. I think that each person is different in that way. I think that I see goalies pounding balls against the wall. I've seen some really good goalies pound the ball against the wall and go out and play poorly. I've never went up once up to and asked them and say, does that work?
Yeah.
Because they're convinced that it works, and you have to convince yourself. That's the biggest part of prep. The biggest challenge today for me is the music in the locker room that detracts away from concentration. So as a goalie, you need more, and I'm not going to say need in a way of like you need electrolytes. I would say you need, more concert music and, things that keep your emotions even rather than Hell's Bells and, Red Bull, because that's going to throw your emotion out of whack. And the more you have the ups, the more you're going to have the downs. So, people talk about, and I'll try to give an illustration, people talk about my wins. I can give it an asterisk and say, yeah, well, I also had 115 ties that I would like to convert to wins, but we had ties at that time. But I don't think about the wins or the ties. I think about the losses and how in those losses, those failures made me prepare better. So I think about those things. And in my preparation, I know that there's a detail of my game that I have to get better. So for young goalies, and to speak directly to them, it's getting a stick on the puck. I watch a lot of hockey, currently watching a ton of college hockey because I have to select as a general manager for our World Junior team, the best players available for Christmas time, right? So I'm looking at our goaltenders and who can get stick on puck in order to kill a play rather than just have it hit your pad and become a rebound. Young goalies are right now, they're not developing any stick training. And so, I'm not thinking about preparation off the ice for these kids. I'm thinking about it on the ice. So, my suggestions are mostly on ice suggestions right now. And how do you get prepared to take it out on the ice? I mean, those types of things are unique, I think, to each person of what they're visualizing, what video they're watching now, because there's so much more advantages of that. But also, how are you becoming calm and not getting caught up with the emotions of the day? Can you check your cell phone at the door along with your ego and the rest of the things that you think you're great about? Because you're going to walk out there and all those things are going to matter because you're going to think of the most craziest things at the most inopportune time. And a funny illustration is my early days in New York. I really was working on my preparation at the time, but I had a little dog, and my wife and I weren't wife and husband yet, but she was coming into town. And in the second period of a game in Madison Square Garden, I saw her sitting behind the glass. And the only thing I could think of is if she took the dog out for a pee. The craziest things enter your mind at the most inopportune time. So fortunately we won the game and it became non-relevant, but I share that with you because if you don't check all those things, if you don't take your laundry and get it done and your dry cleaning's finished and whatever else you have left at home, if those things aren't done, they will distract.
Yeah. Well, that I think everyone can take a little bit of that and apply it to their lives to optimize a little bit. We could spend the rest of the episode just talking about your career, but you get inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Can you just touch on that moment? Not only what it meant for you, but your family, because they were on the journey as well.
Yeah. So I just want to be distinct here. So this is the USA Hockey Hall of Fame, and because I haven't been inducted into the NHL Hall of Fame, which I got to say I'd love to be in, but I'm not there. So anyway, the induction into the USA Hockey Hall of Fame was fantastic, and it was. You're right. It's a family affair. They were there for me, with me, and for me at that time. My induction ceremony was in North Dakota, and North Dakota has become a very special place to me because of that. And the words that were said about me by Lou Vero, who basically, you know, introduced me to the Hall of Fame and said the kind words that I should have played for the '84 Olympic team. But he also said that he thought I was one of the best goalies in the United States ever, which means a lot to me with all the great people that we have in our country. But I think that means more than the actual award. It's the impact that you left on people in your family. You know, I have 6 grandkids right now, and they dig into my closet every once in a while and pull out a hockey card, and they call them pop cards. So, you know, it's just the lasting effect that you could leave that, you know, most of the time, you know, I'm irrelevant on the hockey, you know, ice right now. But at one point I had a time that I could influence people and, you know, share good stories in games, and had an impact, hopefully in a positive way, in a sport that I grew to love. And I'm probably, you know, it doesn't really need me. I need it more than it needs me. So I'm just very grateful for that impact.
And you're still doing it. After you retired, you got into coaching, managing, to where now you're with USA Hockey. Kind of go through that briefly. What were the first few years like after you retired, and you know how you got into whatever you were doing right after, and how you progressed to where you're at USA Hockey right now? Because our paths first crossed in Muskegon.
Yeah,
with one of my boys there.
Yeah, quickly. You know, I probably rushed into it too quick. We're talking about 2002, where I made a decision with my family we were living on Long Island at the time. I probably had an opportunity to play another year, and I wish I would have, because the Devils went on to win the Stanley Cup. And I remember watching that from my couch saying, boy, you made one bad decision here. But I actually went back up to the Sioux, was an owner in the team there, and thought I could coach and general manager it. I realized that I wasn't a great coach, but I was probably a better manager. And then moved on from that to doing games on television, because I had an opportunity there at the NHL level, and something I always wanted to do. Missed an opportunity with ESPN when I moved from Long Island to do that. But, you know, I love the game and talking about it, so it was pretty easy for me. But then it just became, you know, I missed the competitive side of it, and an opportunity came up in Muskegon in the USHL, and you know, I talked about it, prayed about it with my wife, and our second son was starting a family over on the west side of Michigan, so we thought, boy, this could be a good combo. And I was fortunate enough to get the job and start, you know, the general manager side of what's known as a career, and it went well, you know. And the league was very hard to manage, with everybody being a college-bound player, and we live in a college-bound country. I really engaged in it. You know, you mentioned a little bit about Rem, and, you know, Rem Pitlick is a very good hockey player, and, you know, it was kind of hard not to see that at Shattuck St. Mary's as a young, smaller player, but boy, he could really fly. And speed was really becoming the number one factor in young players. And I think today, you know, the number one factor, you're looking, you know, between IQ and speed, I think speed's winning out still. So, you know, we were fortunate at that time to be able to get a Rem Pitlick from another organization. And you know, we had, you know, the selection of coaches, the selection of staff, the selection of players. I mean, it all goes into managing, and then just to make sure everybody's communicating and doing well. And, you know, so I really learned a lot. And, you know, my position today, you know, I get a little weak in the knees when I say it happened on the backs of a good friend of mine, Jim Johansson, passing. So, yeah. You know, we lost a great one in Jimmy, and, you know, he's going into the USA Hockey Hall of Fame this year. So I'll be there for that in November in Minnesota. And probably shed a tear or two over a good friend. And, I mean, I took over this position, didn't know what I was getting into. And now, I'm busy all the time and I love it. To be honest with you, I love the game more now than I did when I played because I see all of it, I see all of it. And it's a different level of preparation for me on each day. I'm looking at my calendar, my time, and how I mismanage that most of the time. But, it's you realize it's not how you hit them, it's how you miss them in this game, So sometimes a big decision isn't making a decision. It's just sitting calm and being patient. So, I hope that I've matured a bit from the competitive, probably prideful little goalie I was. But, I mean, it's a journey, right? I mean, life's a journey. It's not a destination. And, I'm very thankful for all the opportunities I've been given, and I'm engaging in a big one for our country. And right now we're ranked 4th in the world, and it's my job to get us to number 1.
Yes. And with I guess the bricklayer that laid the foundation and Jimmy Johansson, who I played with in '92 on that tour. So what a spectacular human being. But, this past NHL draft, just in the first round, you had 6 players coming out of the program, the National Development Program. I was lucky. My youngest, Rhett, he played this past weekend with Minnesota Gophers with Logan Cooley and Jimmy Snuggerud.
Yeah.
So was this like a 5-year plan and it finally hit this past year? Because this had to have been, if not the most successful, one of the most successful draft years you guys have had from a program level.
Yeah, I would say that, each year you're looking at that, and, it's one of the benchmarks now, I think, Lance, is the draft and the impact the national team program is having on our country. And, you said it. I mean, Rhett's getting an opportunity to play with 2 of our best young players in the world.
Yes.
And it's making him a better player. And that's development. I mean, I love all the skills that you've taught and others are teaching out there. But at the end of the day, the funnel happens, and you just hoping that we build a bigger bench. And right now with 200 players in the NHL, our bench is getting bigger and everybody's taking note. The draft is getting more successful from, players playing in the USHL with our national team development program, playing in the league. We've got a pretty good system going. And probably the biggest thing that I'm proud of is that we're a college-bound country. And it's very straightforward on our men's side, on our women's side, that we maintain that we want education to be part of our growth, and that we just don't get too focused on the money side. That, I have an old saying that money only solves money questions or money problems, and then there's the rest of them. We have a very big strength. College hockey's having a big impact on the NHL. And, I look at players that we have coming through with Austin Matthews, arguably one of the best hockey players in the National Hockey League. And, we have growth, like who can argue with the growth and the development, even though we want to change some things and maintain some things, and we can have good, healthy arguments over all these things. We can't lose our way. And I'm very proud of the fact that, that Rhett can get an opportunity to play at the University of Minnesota for Bob and the rest of those players, and that people are eager to go to school. And like Brock Faber there, like not hurrying up too fast to get to the NHL. And he's going to have a long career, but, just to want to want to be a gopher, want to be at school, want to do the right things for the right reasons. Those things are integral to our country and to the game of hockey. So, those types of things I'm happy to see, out there.
What do you most like about today's game? For the NHL, college, do you like the direction it's going?
Yeah, I love the respect of the game right now. I really do. I think that we're getting a lot of the nonsense out of the game. The game's taking the center place, rather than, some of the nonsense that we had back in the day that we, over a couple adult beverages we can laugh about. But really the silly stuff in the game is really not there. Like the wholeness of the game, the IQ, the speed, the quickness. There's a lot of good hockey games out there to watch in the National Hockey League, and it's happening quicker. I actually like the Big Ten rule that they went to 12-minute intermissions, to be honest with you. I think that the more that we can tighten up our time, I argued recently at the IHF meetings that we had a 13-minute review on a high sticking at the World Junior over a goal that Matty Nyes, never got rewarded with. But it came down to such a quirky thing. But the whole episode took 13 minutes. Like we can't have that in the game. We can't have, our coaches have to make a decision in 45 seconds, but the officials can make it in 13 minutes. These types of things have to, improve. But I think on the whole, the advancement of video coaching, the advancement of the way the game's being played, I don't worry about my grandkids playing this game anymore. And there was a time that I did, I don't like to see the injuries on the ice, on the men's side and the women's side and all that. So that's the part of the game that I kind of get concerned with the most, is the respect. But I see the respect factor increasing and not going the opposite way. So that's probably the most encouraging thing that I see in today's game.
Yeah, well said. And I would agree with you. I would agree with you there. So I have one more question that I'd like to ask, and then I'll let you go, John. And again, thank you. What advice would you give? There's that top tier of players that they're going to get their opportunities, they're going to get noticed, but then there's a middle tier that still is going to populate, a lot of the U.S. colleges and different leagues up in Canada. What advice would you give one of those middle tier players? If they're reaching for something that's lofty, to play college or even major junior, because that's a real goal too, even if you don't, value the college. But what type of advice would you give them, just how to operate, on a daily or weekly basis?
Great question. The way that I would answer it is this way. I would, and it might not make a lot of sense, but I would say be where you are now. Don't be where you are 2 years from now and think that you're going to control it in some way. Just be where your feet are, everybody out there in the world of sports wants you, in hockey, everybody wants you to advance and become a good player. There isn't anybody out there that doesn't want the next best Lance Pitlick or John Vanbiesbrouck. Everybody wants that. The problem is when you try to advance it too fast and you're not just being where you are right now and trying to improve on yourself for tomorrow, not for next year, and then trying to manipulate a situation with words that fall on deaf ears or just don't matter. Just do it with your actions, be where you are now, know that everybody's going to be watching anyway. And the hard part is you are going to be judged on all the things that you do. And it's not just on the ice, there are guys, we had a player, Nolan Sullivan. I'll never forget him. He's from, I think, Eden Prairie, and he's at Omaha, or he was I think he's the captain of the team. you couldn't have a better person. But that kid was just firmly planted on the ground. And he may never be an NHL player, but I wouldn't doubt that he makes it and becomes a long-time NHL player because he's in the here and now, not in the 2 years down the road. So that's probably the best advice I could give.
Being present, just making the moment matter.
Absolutely.
So good. Simple is often a good place to start. So, John, I can't thank you enough for being on here. I know that you're super busy. Best of luck putting that team together for the World Juniors. Congratulations on an amazing career. I was able to witness it live a few times. So thank you for just that, inspiring so many other young goaltenders. And lastly, just glad you're in the game. You make it better every day, and everyone who comes in contact with you leaves with a little more of a smile on their face. So thanks for being on the show, John.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Lance, and much success with the show and with the boys and with the family and, and all that you do. So keep it up.
Thank you, sir. Until our paths cross again, all the best to you.
All right, be well.
Well, that concludes another episode of the Hockey Journey podcast. I can't thank you enough for stopping by and listening. I hope you enjoyed the John Vanbiesbrouck Hockey Journey. After an amazing career, I'm grateful he's still in this great game because he's a solid human being. If you think there's someone in your circle of family and friends that might like this episode as well, please share it with just one person. It will really help me in growing this hockey community. Again, I appreciate you being here. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, or submit a review. I hope to see you back here soon. And do me a favor, make someone close to you smile today. All the best, my friends.